Good day everyone, I am Princess Amadrio from BSP 1A. Together with my co-reporter na Shimpi Yang, we're going to discuss to you the policies of agrarian reform. Ano nga ba itong agrarian reform na ito? The agrarian reform is essentially the restitution of the whole system of agriculture. When we say restitution, it is the act of correcting something or making something right. This agrarian reform anchored in Republic Act No. 6657 o ang Comprehensive Agrarian Reform Law na iprinoklama at itinaguyod ng dating Pangulong Corazon Aquino noong 1988. Nakapaloob sa act na ito ng agrarian reform ay ibig sabihin nito ang redistribution of land regardless of crops or fruits produced to farmers and regular farm workers who are landless, irrespective of the tenural arrangement, to include the totality of the factors and support services designed to lift the economic status of the beneficiaries and all other. Itong agrarian reform na ito ay isa sa mga importanteng aspekto ng ekonomiya ng ating bansa. Bakit? Based on my research, nearly half of the population in our country is employed in the agricultural sector and most citizens live in a rural areas, na kung saan ang pangunahing kinabubuhay nila ay ang pagsasaka. At kaya gustong ipanukhala ng mga farmers ang agrarian reform na ito ay para mag-provide yung mga landowners ng equality in terms of income and opportunities, empower the landowner beneficiaries to have the equitable land ownership, and enhance the agricultural production and productivity, provide the employment to more agricultural workers, and put an end to conflict regarding land ownership. In our attempt to understand the development of agrarian reform in the Philippines, we turn our attention to our country's history, especially our colonial past, where we could find the root of the agrarian whose in the country has experienced up to this very day. Those colonial past are the land ownership in the Philippines under the Spain and American.
Landownership in the Philippines under Spain.
But before we tackle the Spanish era, alamin muna natin kung ano nga ba ang Pilipinas bago tayo sinakop ng mga Espanyol. Before the Spaniards came to the Philippines is already known as civilized country since they have their own economy, politics, at may mga tradisyon na sila na kanilang pinaniniwalaan. At noon, ang mga tao sa Pilipinas ay nakatira sa mga small towns or what we call the barangays. At pinamumunuan ito ng mga chiefs or datos. The datos comprised the nobility or the maharlikas, then came to the timawa or the freemen, followed by the aliping pamamahay or the serfs, and the aliping sagugulid or the slaves. However, despite the existence of the different classes in the social structure, practically everyone has access to the fruits of the soil. Money was unknown and the rice served as the medium of exchange. At ang mga pangunahing kinabubuhay noon ng mga Filipino ay ang pangangaso, pangingisda, pagtatanim at pakikipagkalakalan. Now, here comes the Spain colonized our country. Nangyari ito noong 1521 hanggang 1896.
Here's the three systems introduced by the Spanish colonizer.
First, the Pueblo agriculture. The colonial government at this period introduced sa Pueblo agriculture. Ano nga ba itong Pueblo agriculture na ito? Ito ay isang sistema na kung saan ang mga native rural communities were organized into Pueblo and each Christianized native family is given a 4 to 5 hectares of land to cultivate. The Pueblo agriculture practiced no sharecropper class or landless class. The native families were merely landholders and not landowners. By law, the land assigned to them was the property of the Spanish king, as King Philip II, where they paid their colonial tributes to the Spanish authorities in the form of agricultural products they produced. In short, simula nang tayo ay sinakop ng mga taga-Spain, ang mga Pilipino noon ay nagiging dayuhan na sa sarili nilang mga lupain. Hindi sila binigyan kailanman ng karapatan na maging landowners, kundi landholders lamang. na kung saan nagtatanim sila upang maibenta ito at makapagbayad ng tribute sa mga colonizer. Pag sinabi nating tribute, ito ay kilala ngayon bilang tax or tax payment. Later on, there is what we call the Law of Indies or the Leyes de las Indias. It is the entire body of the laws issued by the Spanish crown for the American and the Asian possessions of its empire. Ibig sabihin na itong law of Indies na ito yung mga nangangasiwa ng social, political, religions at economic life ng mga bansa na kanilang sinakop. Through this law of Indies, the Spanish crown or the monarchy of the Spain awarded vast tracts of land to frees a prior lands to the religious orders. Ito yung Catholic na kung saan binibigyan sila ng mga lupain para makapagtayo ng mga churches. Pangalawa, repartimentos for lands granted to the Spanish military a reward for their service. Itong repartimentos na ito ay sistema by which the crown allowed the certain colonies or the Spanish military to recruit the indigenous peoples for forced labor. Lastly, encomienderos. It is known as the Spanish colonizer. The encomienderos were those who were under the encomienda system. They were granted the right to compel the indigenous people to work their land and to pay tribute. Sila yung mga naka-assign para magkolekta ng mga tribute or ng mga tax ng mga native Filipino noon. And also, these encomienderos, they are mandated through this grant to convert the natives to Christianity and endorse the Spanish as their primary language. Noon kasi, ang mga native Filipinos have uncleared religions. Other religions present include the animism, indigenous religious beliefs, and mythologies such as the Anito and influences from the Hinduism and Buddhism. Noon, ang mga lingwahe ng Pilipino ay form of Tagalog that has a conventional writing system known as baybayin. Itong baybayin na ito, ginagamit ito ng mga different ethnic groups sa Pilipinas. Those mandated to manage the lands given to them where Filipinos worked and paid their tributes to the encomienderos. During this era, Filipinos were not given the right to own the land. Only they do is to work in them so that they might have a share of crops and pay the tribute. Now, let's proceed to the encomienda system during the Spanish era. Ano nga ba itong sistema na ito? This system is established by the Spanish crown in the 1500s. It was a formal system of forced labor in the Spanish colonies in the Philippines, intended to encourage the conquest and the colonization. Under the system, the leaders of the indigenous community paid tribute to the colonies. Or ito yung mga datos or mga chiefs na kung saan nagbibigay sila ng mga pagkain, damit, mga minerals, or mga manggagawa. This system was fundamental to the economics of early Spanish colonialism. This system was also called as unfair and abusive system. Bakit? Is it because the system was practiced wherein the tillers were made to compulsory sell at a very low price or surrender their agricultural harvest to the Spanish authorities, where the encomienderos can resell it for a profit? Filipinos during this system were also required to render the services to their encomienderos that were unrelated to farming. Sa sistema na ito, meron pala silang vision, which is the Spanish crown envisioned that the encomienda system have a mutual obligation between the indigenous people and the colonies, wherein the indigenous people would provide the limited tribute and labor, while the colonies would provide the religious and cultural instruction. But in reality, the tribute and labor demands went well beyond established limits. From the encomienda system, there is a new developed system act as a new form of ownership. It is the hacienda system. This system developed in the beginning of the 19th century. This system was designed to keep the people that were in debt working on a piece of land. People working on haciendas were made to stay there as long as possible, using the various means. The owners of these haciendas were called the haciendados, and they were able to make huge amount of money by exploiting these workers or by the Filipino workers. During in 1865, the Spanish Crown made a law ordering the landholders to register their land holdings. At yung mga tao lang na nakakaalam sa law na ito ay siyang makakapag-benefits. And those ancestral lands were claimed and registered in other people's name, such as the Spanish officials or the local chieftains. As a result, many peasant families were driven out from the lands they have been cultivating for centuries or were forced to become tillers. As more tillers were abused, expoliated, and deprived of their rights, the revolution of the peasant and the farmers in 1896 articulated their aspiration for agrarian reform and for a just society. Women also fought for a freedom and played an important role in the planning and implementing the activities of the revolutionary movement. However, the First Philippine Republic was short-lived because there is an entrance of the Americans would signal as a new era of the colonialism and imperialism in the Philippines. And my partner Nashim will be discussing it